Michelle, welcome to the On Purpose podcast, my friend. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Man, it's my pleasure to have you. And when I came across your story, like I thought there was no better place to have you and to share it than here with the On Purpose community.
Yeah, absolutely.
What give us a brief introduction to you, Michelle, and kind of how our paths crossed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, so I am a mom of three, two angel babies and a living child who is three or is just about to be three. We're a couple days away from his birthday. And I have kind of done a lot of different things in my life. I often refer to myself as a recovering attorney. So I practiced law for about a decade. Kind of went a little bit away from it, but still in the same venue. And then losing my daughter in May of 2018 just upended everything. And I decided to start my own nonprofit, which was not something that I had ever planned on doing. And in fact, had actually resisted doing. I had worked in nonprofit for pretty much my whole career. And I had always said I would never start my own nonprofit, right? Never say never. So I did. And so we are coming up on our 5-year anniversary of the nonprofit in Colette's name, my daughter who died. And yeah, and so I just love to get the word out. I think these are areas that people don't like talking about. We don't talk about death, we don't talk about grief, and we really don't talk about it when it comes to babies. And I think
Sure.
that's really something that we need to be addressing and talking about. And
I
so
love
that's
it.
kind of where paths crossed.
Well, I want to first say thank you for having the courage to share publicly, right? Because I think that's the first step, right? To get other people to talk about, somebody has to talk about it first. So I want to applaud you for the courage to go public and to run your foundation stuff. And I can't wait to get into that story and share that. But first, before we do that, we always warm things up, right? Because we got to get into the heavier stuff. So you're a recovering lawyer. How is recovering going for you?
It's good. I will say that I really loved practicing law for a while, and honestly, it was a lot of the not the work with clients. I loved working with clients. It was a lot of the sort of toxic masculinity that exists in the law, right? And so it was, being talked down to by judges and other attorneys and all of that. And, it starts to wear on you after a while. And honestly, if that had been not part of it, I might still be practicing. I don't know. It's really hard to say. I think that things worked out in ways they were supposed to. But that was really my biggest thing. And I will say, it's been about 7 years since I stopped practicing. And I will say every once in a while, especially, I'll see a show or I'll see something and I'll think of those like great, wonderful, courtroom moments that I loved and that I thrived on. And then I have to remember that you have to go through a lot of stuff to get to those things. And it's that other stuff that I don't really want to
Yeah,
deal with.
that's the highlight reel part of the job.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. Well, we wish you well on your recovery from law, right? So let's get the community to know a little bit about Michelle behind the scenes. So I'm gonna warm you up here with some questions. I love knowing this stuff. You get stranded on a deserted island. You get one food forever. What would
Ooh,
you be eating?
ooh, that is a really good question. One food forever. Oh my God. Um, I'm gonna go with tacos because I feel like that's kind of like you can manipulate that a little bit and make some changes so it's not, never gets boring. So
Yeah, and nobody ever has a bad Taco Tuesday.
right, exactly. Even your worst taco is still pretty awesome. So
Oh, they're the best food. That's a good
yeah.
one. All right. I wasn't sure if you were going to go taking a deep dish Chicago style pizza with you out to your island.
You know, not every day. Not every day. I mean, I still love my pizza and I did think about pizza, but I was like, nah. So yeah.
All right. Michelle, if you could have a superpower, what would your superpower be and why would you want it?
Hmm. Well, I often say I would love to clone myself, so I could be in multiple places. So I think some sort of cloning feature or ability to speed up time and be in two places at the same time, that kind of thing, I would love to do because there's so many things to do. And I think especially as a mom and a working mom, um, I think that, trying to, the idea of like having it all and trying to be there for your kids and, still have a professional life and somehow in the middle of that also remember that you are a human that needs to be taken care of as well. I think it would be really awesome to just have the ability to have two halves of myself doing, things at the same time and leaving some, extra room for me. So I think that's where I would go.
Would you send one of your halves on vacation though? Would you like rotate that around or
I kind of really do. Yeah. That would be awesome too. But yes, all of that. So I think, yeah, I think that's a superpower that they should like grant parents on,
for sure moms, for sure
Yes.
moms. They definitely got a lot of work on their plates.
Yeah.
All right, Michelle, favorite book.
Oh, favorite book. This has changed multiple times over the years for this. I'm going to say it's Michelle Obama's book, Becoming. I really felt like that. I love Michelle Obama and I just, I think she's amazing. But I think that book really came at a time. It was not long after my daughter had died. And I think her talking about her own fertility struggles, her own miscarriage, and just really seeing that and feeling like I wasn't alone and feeling like, people who had power and access to resources and everything still had the same issues that I had. And I think that was really a powerful thing. And I think to read just another mom talking about how she was trying to balance everything and trying to do everything. Um, and I just really found it to be a very powerful and helpful book and just to break a silence that I think is so feels so heavy to not talk about those kinds of things.
Very cool. Yeah, I've not read that, so I have to add that to our list. You get dinner with one person. Who would you want to have dinner with, and what would you want to ask them?
Ooh. Again, question that could change on a dime, but I'm going to say right now, I would really love to have dinner with my grandfather. My grandfather and I were super close. He died when I was 12. And I think right now I have that a lot on my mind. I'm sort of at a point where, I'm really disheartened with a lot of things in this country. And my grandfather, brought a very young family with young children to the US from Cuba. And when his country didn't look like how he thought it was supposed to look like and how he expected it to look like. And so I think I would just love to have, even 5 minutes with him to just say, how did you make that decision and what did you do? And if you had stayed, what would that have looked like? And just kind of talk through all of that. And I think that would be really, it's something that I often wish I just had 5 minutes with to say that.
Yeah, for sure. Grandparents commonly come up to that as the answer in that question.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
you really don't appreciate them almost till they're gone, right? Because you're so young that you don't have all the life questions you have now. You
Right.
couldn't
Right.
possibly know it. Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
interesting.
And like I would love for him to meet my son. My son has his name as his middle name. And so I would just like
Oh,
love to have him meet him and to have met my daughter. And I hope in some, we don't know what happens in the afterlife, but I always hope that my daughter is in the heaven, in a whatever you want to call it. And that she's being spoiled by my grandfather the way that I was spoiled by him. And and I don't know if that's actually true. It's what, so kind of sustains me and that I believe to be true. But yeah, so I think, just to have that experience would be great.
well, I'll tell you what, you put a little tear in my eye on that because I 100% believe it's true. I have in my belief, there's no doubt she's up there being spoiled right now. And um, telling you don't have to worry. I think
Yeah,
that's the big thing. So, Michelle, are you warmed up? How you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I like your
Good. You
question.
ready? You're good.
Yes.
You got tacos on your mind for later today. We're gonna skip the deep dish pizza. Um, let's just start then with the obvious. Talk to me about Collette and the story of Collette.
Yeah. Yeah. So the story of Collette, really starts with my husband and I got married in August of 2016. And we had been friends for several years. And then we started dating and got married. And so we're 5 years apart. So I was in my early-ish 30s, but nearing 35. And he was towards the end and nearing 40. And we started trying right away because of our ages, and we knew we wanted to have kids and could not get pregnant. And, just one of those, right? I felt like I had grown up with this idea of, you have sex, you get pregnant, right? And all of a sudden I was in this time where it was like, we're doing all of this, and why are we not getting pregnant? After about 6 months of trying, we went and got fertility testing done. We got a diagnosis of infertility because it had been long enough, but with no real reason why. So, there was, maybe we could improve a little bit here and a little bit there, but, we really don't know why you're having these issues. And so we tried and we did infertility treatments. And on our first round of IVF, I got pregnant, and then I miscarried about 7.5 weeks with that. And that's our nickname for baby at the time was Sweet Pea when we lost them. So we just say Sweet Pea and tried again and failed. And then on our third round, we got pregnant with our daughter, Collette. And I was so excited to be pregnant. And I was so excited to stay pregnant. And then the idea that I had in my mind of what pregnancy was like was far from what my experience was. So I was sick all the time. I think morning sickness is the worst named thing in the world because I was sick all day long and often at night a lot more than in the morning. But we were just so thrilled, and we got past, kind of the scary first trimester and felt like this is good. And then we, continued on and things were good. When I was 21 weeks pregnant, I really became obsessive about it. I had to make an extra appointment with my OB. Really fought things. I got sort of the coveted 6 p.m. slot and had nurses who I must have been the last appointment of the day. So the nurses called and they're like, you don't have to come in. And sort of deterred me from doing this. And I was really insistent. I said, no, I'm coming in and I will show up in your office. And, that's what I'm doing. No idea why that was the case, why I was doing this. And I knew, there was sort of an inner voice in me that was saying, Michelle, you're kind of being crazy about this. And so we went to that appointment, and including my husband, who later then admitted, I had a feeling, later admitted that he thought I was overreacting and being a little insane pregnant woman.
You just had an intuition. You needed another appointment.
And I just needed to go to that appointment. I don't know why. And when I got there, my blood pressure was 188 over 110. And so normal is 120 over 80. So super high. And they tried several times and nothing. And so my OB said, you need to go to labor and delivery. She said, they'll monitor you and they might put you on meds. But this is too high and I'm concerned. And so we went, joking on the way over that, I had come from work. We were a little rushed. We were waiting to, I seem to have some nervous energy about, the pregnancy and baby and all this. And so maybe just now that we had heard the heartbeat, that maybe I would show up at labor and delivery basically, and they would laugh at us and say, why are you here? Everything's fine. That was far from the case. So my blood pressure was still high, and in fact got a little bit higher during that time period. And I was admitted, and I didn't really know why I was admitted or for how long. The only thing I remembered was that they were talking about a 24-hour urine test. And that was what I thought I was being admitted for, was for them to do the test. So I was expecting 1 night, 2 nights, and then back to normal, back to life. And so after midnight, my husband ran home. Our poor dog had not been out all day. So he went to let out the dog and get a few things for me since I was staying. And while he was gone, my OB's partner, who had been in deliveries, finally had a moment. She came and she said, did anyone tell you what happened? And what's going on? And I said, no. And she said, you have severe preeclampsia. you are being admitted and you will be here until you deliver.
Mm.
And so like calendar wise, I like to always sort of say that was the evening of May 8th. I wasn't due till September 7th.
Oh
Um,
gosh. So
so
what is that medical term mean?
yeah, so preeclampsia is essentially elevated blood pressure. That's the most common complaint of it. It can be, there's a lot of other symptoms, but it has really negative effects because obviously for me, it would have negative effects of having a high blood pressure
Right.
reading. You start going closer to the 200s, you get into stroke possibilities and things like that. And then for baby, just the effect of, you know, being in a womb of somebody who's having
Yeah.
these issues and all of that. And there's a lot of potential complications and issues that can arise with baby. So in my case, Collette was not growing at the rate she should have been growing. So she was actually measuring very small when she was about 2 weeks behind when I was first admitted. On the ultrasound, she was measuring about 2 weeks behind. And the doctors were hopeful that once they were able to regulate my blood pressure and monitor me to make sure I didn't have any other spikes or anything, that there would be some catch up of growth.
Okay.
So I was in the hospital, and went from just kind of the everyday, get up, go to work, come home, all of that kind of stuff, to basically my sole job was to kind of cook her as long as possible. And we knew, so our hospital at the time would not intervene with medical care until 24 weeks, which is what they consider viability. And that might have changed. It's been 5 years, and there's been some recommendations about earlier interventions for 22, 23 weekers. So my biggest goal was to get to 24 weeks because if I didn't and they had to deliver, we would just get to hold her and let her pass in our arms. And
Yeah.
I didn't want that to happen if I could prevent it. So I stayed. And so after about little over 3 weeks, I had a repeat ultrasound, and they found that Collette had not caught up and in fact had no growth in those 3 weeks. And so she was now measuring probably 4 to 5 weeks behind schedule. And the doctors recommended delivery, saying, really, there's more interventions we can do on the outside than we can do right now while she's inside you. And so she was born 24 weeks and 5 days. So just the edge of what is generally considered viability. And she, we were prepared for all this stuff, right? And so if we were prepared, they told us you won't be able to hear her. She's too young. So she won't cry. She won't say anything. You won't hear her. And they delivered her, and the room got quiet. They said she's a girl. We didn't find out sex until she was born. And although I knew she was a girl from the very beginning. And, they said she's a girl and did this. And then the room kind of got quiet. And then in this quiet, I heard this like tiny but really powerful squeak.
Mm.
And I said, is that her? And they said, yeah. And they said, she shouldn't be able to make that noise at this point. And I remember thinking, of course, it's my badass daughter, right? Like, derived from me and derived from my husband. Like,
Right.
this is like, activism and everything is in our blood work and like, in our blood. And like, this, of course, it's going to be this kid that's going to defy odds. And then they had also warned us that if the smallest intubation tube did not fit her, there wasn't anything they could do, and that there was some concern, given her size, that it might not fit. The second to smallest fit her, and so it just sort of felt like, being in this room and just thinking, of course she's going to defy odds, like this is what we're going to do. And so she went straight to the NICU. And, the NICU, for anybody who hasn't experienced it, or even for people who have, is a super scary place, right? And my younger sister is 4 years younger than me, and she was 8 weeks premature. So I do remember the NICU from a young age. So I thought I was prepared for it. You're not, until you experience a child of yours in the NICU. There's nothing to prepare you for it. So she was just over a pound when she was born, really tiny in an incubator. Can't really see much of her face or anything because of all the tubes and wires and everything. Didn't get to hold her, all of those things that you just naturally assume when you are having a child that you're going to get to do. We didn't get to do any of those. And also I'm still recovering from a major surgery. And so, kind of doing that. And so we we just figured we were there for a while. And we settled into a little bit of a routine. My husband went back to work. So he would get up early and he would head to work, and he would either stop by on the way or call and talk to the nurses about how the night had gone, anything that was coming up, if there were specific tests scheduled that day or not, anything like that. And then he would let me know. And since I was slower moving with recovery, then I would get ready and I would head to the hospital. And then I would usually stay there most of the day and then wait for my husband. And we would usually spend some time, just the three of us. And then we would get dinner and go home. And that was kind of the routine we settled into.
Sure.
After 9 days, same thing happened. My husband got up and went into work, and then he sent me a message and he said, when I called to talk to the nurses, the nurse put the doctor on the phone. And those are kind of like, right, those are the bad moments. And I was like, okay. So I quickly got ready and went to the hospital. And it had just so happened that this was now a new shift schedule. So it was a new doctor that I had not met. He had met my husband the day that Collette was born. And so when I got there, he said, are you Colette's mom? And I said, yes. And he said, okay, I'm the doctor. And he introduced himself and he said, let's talk. And I said, okay. And I went to say, okay, start talking. And he said, let me find a room for us. And again, sort of like another, this is not good. Right.
Right.
And so he explained all this stuff, and he was basically like, we're going to do everything we can, but I need to warn you, like, this is not looking great. And I don't ever remember him using the words death or dying or anything. And I think that there was a little bit of denial and a little bit of just, you're telling me things that aren't going to happen. Like, of course you're preparing me for the worst, but this isn't going to happen. It was really a lot of denial. And he said, I think you should call your husband. You have this room for as long as you want. And he went to turn to leave, and he got to the door, and then he stepped back and he turned around to me and he said, do you believe in baptism? And I said, I do. And he said, it's time. And that, to me, I think just really triggered the only time that you would say that this is time is you're not expecting my daughter to live. And so I called my husband, and as soon as he answered the phone, I burst into tears. And so he left work and came, and my sister came, and my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law both came. And it was actually ironic. My mom, that was the one day my mom said, I cannot leave work today. Like, wow. If anything happens, like, don't let anything happen. And that was kind of her joke to me. So, it was just kind of doing this, and she was just there, and she was doing stuff, and we knew she was okay. We knew she wasn't great, but I just really kept thinking she's going to pull through. And I was really in denial. And then we had, so at one point when my mother-in-law was there, I stepped out of the room. There was only 2 visitors at a time. So I stepped out of the room so she could visit. And my husband asked me, do you want to see her again before shift change? And so in most NICUs, this is the case. During a shift change, that's the only time that parents are asked to leave, is while they're doing the shift change. And they're really strict. So when the shift change hours are, and those are the hours you are not allowed in, and otherwise you're allowed 24 hours a day. And I said, no, it's fine. I was like, we'll come back after shift change. I was like, now let's just go get something to eat or something, and then we'll come back. And I was in the family room with my sister and my sister-in-law, and a nurse came in and said, "Mom, they're looking for you." And I came in, and it was in that moment that I realized we are now officially in shift change hour, and they're not kicking us out. And the whole dynamic had shifted, and I knew what was happening. And so we sat by her isolette and talked to her, and reached in and held hands and did all of that. At some point, I know my sister came into the room and stood behind me and had her hand on my shoulders and all that. And again, that was like another reminder, like, you're breaking protocol to allow a third person in. Like, this is not, none of this is good. And then the doctor turned to us, and I knew what he was about to say, which was basically he probably started to say some words. And I think that was to make decisions about removing support. And I think I only screamed this in my head. I may have screamed it out loud. I don't know. I just said, "Collette, please don't make me make this decision." And almost as like, a gift to Mom, her numbers immediately started to drop after I thought this, said this, whatever it was. And so the doctors and nurses were awesome, and they, kept her alive, and we got her baptized, and then they let us go into a family room where my parents had gotten there. Both my sister and my sister-in-law's husbands had gotten there, and they let us hold her until she passed. And so we all got to hold her. She died in my husband and my arms. A lot of tears, some laughter, because I think that that's always really important. And really just got to say goodbye to her in the very best way. But the first time that I held my daughter was as she was dying. And that's really something that I think is, you don't really get back. You don't really recover from that kind of stuff. You just sort of adapt to it and accept it, and go on with life as that part of your world has just been shook and broken. And then we had time in there, and we had time with her. And then there's an incredible organization, Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep, that works with professional photographers who come in and they will take pictures of babies after they pass. And so we waited, and that photographer came in. And so we have really gorgeous pictures of Collette, where we don't have wires, we don't have anything on, and we can just really just see her. And we have these pictures. I mean, she had my nose. That was what everyone who saw pictures or met her said right away, was like, "Oh my God, she's got Michelle's nose." And so, all of those kinds of things. She had these really, she was so tiny, but she had these really long legs and these long arms. And so sort of almost as if she was meant to be really tall. And so we have all those pictures, and that's really a blessing. But it's surreal. It is surreal to lose a child, right? You're not supposed to lose a child. And it feels very isolating. It feels like this has never happened to anybody else in the world. And I think that's one of the reasons why I talk so much about it, is it does feel so isolating, and people don't know what to say, and people don't know what you're feeling, you're experiencing. And so I always think, like, sharing my story, if one less person, doesn't feel that complete isolation, then like I've done my job, and that's all I needed to do. And I think also, like, this is my daughter, right? I mean,
Yeah.
find me a mom who doesn't love talking about their kids, and
Right.
I will call you a liar. Like, and so I get to talk about my daughter all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a really important thing.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love that we're able to share that story. It took me a minute to collect myself to even get the next question for you, but I wanted to ask you, I sensed a little change in your tone as you were telling the story and reliving this, that when they didn't use direct words to you or direct language like death or dying,
Right.
did you wish they would have? Like,
Yeah. In retrospect, I do wish they wouldn't. I think I think I needed that. I needed to get away from the platitudes. And I do this. I've spoken with service providers all the time, and I say, there are ways in which to do it. You don't have to be um, cruel about it or so callous about it. There are ways to do it and to use words and to say things. And I think that's really for me, I think once we made it past 24, 48 hours, 72 hours, I was planning for a child who's going to come home with medical issues and maybe disabilities, right? So I was thinking of things like, okay, we don't have a bedroom on our first floor. If she can't manage stairs, could we turn something into a bedroom? And what would that look like? And I was thinking about that. I was thinking about if there was a wheelchair or anything, how could we set up our house in such a way? Like I was thinking about that kind of stuff. I was thinking about how to balance a lot of medical appointments. I was not thinking that she was going to die. And I think that that's a very common and of parents that I've talked to that have lost a child after the child's been in NICU for, however long, they all sort of say the same thing. It's like, we just didn't think that that would happen. Right. And yes, I knew logically, obviously if she had had some sort of surgery, I know logically, like surgery for anybody carries risks, let alone for a tiny infant. But I just didn't really think that we would go from she was in this and then she wasn't, and there was nothing they could do to prevent it from happening. And so I wish it was talked about more, and really just addressed, because I think not that it would have made anything easier, but I think I would have been less surprised and less thrown that that could happen that quickly. And
okay.
I think, yeah, I would have liked to have heard some of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I have no idea. I've never been in your shoes and I've never been in that situation. So I'm just trying to imagine best I can. I do have a question. How did your husband handle things? Because as I'm listening to that story, I'm like, oh my gosh, if that's me, like not only am I worried about my baby girl, but I'm also worried about my wife. Like I got two of you I'm worried about. How did he handle things?
Right. Um, I think, right, how do any of us handle any of these kinds of things, right? Um, I think that that aspect of having two of us didn't occur to me for a while. And I do remember we had a memorial for Collette, and he said he felt really lucky that day because he could have lost me too. And um, I remember thinking, how can you feel lucky? Like our daughter died. I mean, what are you talking about? And really, it took me some time to really process that. I think it's scary, right? As a mom and as one who was pregnant, I didn't really think about the risk to myself, quite honestly. I mean, I knew it, but I didn't really think about it. To
Right.
me, it was protect and save this baby. And that was my primary goal, right? And even to the point where during my C-section, they got her out right away. And it looked like all they had to do was basically close me up. And my husband gave them some time to like work on Collette. They told us it wouldn't be right away. And after a certain period of time, he turned to me and he said, I really think I should go see Collette, but I don't want to leave you. And I said, no, go see Collette. That's the important one. And he left. And, we had a very, and we had a good thing. And I said, go take care of our baby. And he left. And then I had some complications where they weren't able to get my intestines back in. And the epidural I had started to wear off. It had been too long. And so they said, we're going to put you under. And just the day before, we had talked to anesthesiology, who had said with preeclampsia, they were really concerned and it was dangerous to put me under. And as they're telling me this, I remember thinking, okay, so I'm not going to wake up from this, and that's okay, because Collette is going to be healthy and doing this. And I remember having two thoughts of, I said goodbye to my husband in the best way that I possibly could imagine. And if that's what I have to do, that's what I have to do. And then, because I usually like to take the heavy with a little bit of humor too. And then I said, and at least we've already picked her name, so he's not going to name her something stupid. And those were the two thoughts I had as I was going
Right.
under. I honestly didn't think so. On the reverse side, that I didn't know for a little while was, they were still working on Collette NICU. So my husband stayed there in the hallway for a little while, and then he decided to go back down. And he overheard nurses talking as they were leaving the operating room, saying, or, whatever it was, saying, oh yeah, they're having problems putting her intestines back in and they had to put her under. And he, at that point, was like, I don't want to go, because he would have to have gotten completely, sanitized again to go back
Yeah.
in. He was like, I want as many people working on her and doing that as possible, because I like, and no one worrying about me. So he sat in this hallway for
Uh,
a while, not really sure if either of us were going to make it. And, and I think that's a real toll. And, it's something that I've noticed then, since then, that he's more protective of me than I think he
yeah.
ever was. And, um, more direct about things. I'm the type of person, right, who's able to be like, yeah, I know I have a cold. It's okay. I'm fine. I'm fine. I don't need to go to the doctor. I don't need to go to the doctor. And so he's like, often will say things like, I think you should go to the doctor. And that's new. That never happened before. And, so I think there's a lot of those kinds of things. I think we fought more, at first. And we also clung to each other more. And so, I think there's a lot of things, and no two people grieve the same way. And I think that that's also hard. He went back to work and I was still at home, and that was difficult for both of us.
Right.
And, and we would have different reactions, right? When he was gone, there was a little bit of like, I could almost fool myself into thinking, he was with Collette somewhere, right? He had taken her to, a daddy and me. I could think those kinds of things. I just didn't have to think about it. And so when he would come home without a child, sometimes those were the most triggering moments for me. Whereas for him, he was away from me. And then when he would get home, he would feel more comfortable. So there was this like
Wow.
dichotomy of like how we were sort of approaching things. And I don't think either of us could really articulate that for a little while. And it took some time to, for us to connect and to be able to share those kinds of things. Um, you know, my husband's was an eternal optimist, and he's not really that way anymore. He's still way more of an optimist than I tend to be, but he wasn't. And so, as much as I had hated all the platitudes that he would tell me before we lost Collette, I missed them too, because it just became so much more difficult when I was having these thoughts to not have that person who was being the huge cheerleader and telling me all these things. And so that was, a big shift for us. And yeah,
Yeah. Well, I honestly, I want to give both of you a big hug. That's how I feel right now. I just want to give both of you a big hug. I couldn't imagine what you've been through. Talk to us now about Collette's legacy living on in the foundation that you guys have started. And I love your mission is to improve outcomes of pregnancy, childbirth, infancy, and prematurity, as well as assist in grieving process through financial assistance, education, and advocacy. I love anytime I hear advocacy, I love it, because I know somebody's going to be fighting for somebody else. So talk us through the foundation and the work you're doing.
Yeah. So really, the idea started very shortly after I got hospitalized with Collette. I was able to work out, I had a little bit of leave time, so I took some days. I was able to do some work from the hospital, which doctors and nurses encouraged, because they didn't want me to lose my mind completely, being stuck in the hospital with not much able to do. I will say I knew the hospital gift shop and their inventory so well, because that was one of the places I could go out to. So I could have told you within like a second when they had new stuff out. And but basically we lost my salary, pretty quickly, right? And I didn't want to take my short-term disability at that point. I wanted to wait until after Collette was born. And so, we lost my salary. We were lucky, and I still, every day I am so thankful that we were in the position that we could afford that, and I didn't have to have the immediate worries about money. But I also knew how rare that was and how lucky we were and how blessed I was that we were in that position. And I started to think about all the people that weren't in that position. And, as I was in the hospital and people are, texting me and calling me and checking in on me, I would think about them, right? So my friend would text me and I would sort of think about her situation and I'd say, like, yeah, she and her husband make a lot of money. He and his wife make a lot of money. They make a lot of money, but they couldn't afford to, from one day to the next, to go down, one salary or half a salary or anything like that. And so I really started thinking about that financial piece and how we could address this. And so I was in the hospital, I think 2 days when I turned to my husband, I was like, we've got to do something about this. And he sort of exasperated, said, please, for once, could you just think about yourself and like baby and like not think about the greater good? To which I said, you know who you married, so I don't know why this is a surprise to you.
Right.
But it stuck with me. And I really, I had time to really think about this. And then when Collette was in NICU, very much the same thing. We had in the same room as us, there was a pod where it was a little bit older of a baby, and but parents lived like an hour and 15 minutes away. And so they were doing this and they had older kids. So, one thing I noticed was that the parents were never there at the same time because they were trying to balance all of these things. And, and just thinking about, like, if we could pay for a babysitter for, even one day that they could come together, what would that mean? I really started thinking, I had a lot of time to really think about my sister and her time in the NICU, and remembering that my great grandmother lived in New Jersey, we lived in Chicago, and she got on a plane and she was basically in charge of me. And at one point thinking about this, I turned to my mom and I said, who paid for her flight? I mean, just something basic. My mom said, I have no idea. I could not tell you. And she said, all I knew was that she was there and I could say, here's Michelle, and I didn't have to worry about you, or at least like not, top of mind. And so things like that, was there like somebody who could come take care of older kids, or come take care of, mom who's recovering and not dealing very well with, recovery or having complications or anything like that. Where are those people and can we do that? And then, loss, you're asked questions. I mean, I remember, I had just died and then they're in and they're asking us, do you have a funeral home? And I'm like, no, I don't, because
Right.
it was not on my radar. I wasn't thinking of that, and so, and making very quick decisions, based on finances. And so that really like stuck with me. That financial piece really just kept coming back to me to say, not that money solves everything, but money can help in a lot of cases. And how can we remove some obstacles and allow people to just focus on their health, their family's health. And so that kind of kept resonating with me, and I kept going through that. And then I was also finding out how many people I had never known had lost and had never talked about it. So we would get, condolence cards and check-ins, and people would then disclose to us that they had had losses, throughout things, and people that I had known for, my whole life, or I had known for many years, that I never knew this about. And that made me really sad, just the idea of like, you had a child and you don't get to talk about your child because there's some societal belief that, that's not what we talk about. And it was not something that I was going to buy into with our experience. And so, all of that kind of started to do this. I met with social workers at the hospital we delivered at, and I just said, this is kind of my idea, and I don't know, do you think that it would work? And what I found was that they were like, oh my God, what can we do to help you start this? Because this is not, this doesn't really exist. And, I think it's really important to not focus on just one of the areas. So we look at it as sort of three. We say it's the three areas of the three stages of Colette's life, but I think it's three stages that are very intertwined. And so, pregnancy with a high risk pregnancy that develops complications, NICU stays, and then loss. And I think they're all intertwined, right? And so we can have things like, I think of one of our first families that we helped, she had prenatal appointments weekly and did not have reliable transportation and couldn't get to all of her appointments. So she was missing appointments. And doctors were really worried because they weren't being able to monitor her the way that they wanted to. And so, she applied to us and we were able to set her up with a Lyft account that was charged to us. And so she had Lyft rides to and from the doctors. And all of a sudden she was going to regular appointments. Well, she hadn't, I think either she hit full term or almost full term. And she, had a baby in the hospital for a couple of days and then went home. Right. And not to say that was the defining moment of what saved her, but that's a factor of it. Of like,
sure.
If you can get the regular care, it's less likely that you're then going to have all the consequences. And so I think, all of those things kind of compete together. And so that's where the financial piece began. And, to date, so we're just shy of our 5-year anniversary, and we have helped across the US. We've helped families in 48 states and given away over $1 million to over 1,800 families. And just, and we could give to more. I mean, really, our financial restrictions are, unfortunately, there is no like bottomless money pit or, money doesn't grow on trees, right? All the things we heard. I really experience those every day because it's true, because the need is so great. And just, the things that are happening and that families are going through in these crisis situations is just, amazing. And I don't even know how some of these families get out of bed the next day just because there's so much going on.
Right. I can't imagine a worse feeling than wanting with your heart and soul to fight for your child's life, but in the back of your head, there's financial burden coming that you may never escape from. Froze up on me there for a second. You good?
Hello,
Michelle? There, you're back. You froze up for a second.
Yeah, and you froze up for me too, so I don't know. Technology.
Well, I'm glad it's at the very end.
Yeah.
What I was saying is I couldn't imagine a worse situation than fighting for your child's life while at some point in your frame of mind, you have to worry about your financial future.
Right.
So I applaud you. Over $1 million in grants. So now you're using your recovering law skills to write grants.
Right.
And to help people. So I can't, man, I just got to tell you, Collette is looking down and she is smiling and she is happy. Like she wasn't here very long, but she clearly made an impact. And I just love that now there's this old saying that I've always lived by and kind of helps me do what I do in life. And that's saying that a person passes away twice. And that's when they physically pass away once. And then they pass away again when the last time somebody says their name. Right. And I love that Collette is still living with us because we're sharing her story and the families that she impacts, they can share her story and she's gonna have a long, beautiful life.
Right.
In that frame.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And I definitely, I love it. I went to a conference last year of perinatal social workers who I work with all over the place, right? And I got to meet them. And I think when you lose a child, people don't want to talk about it immediately. And then there's a time where they do this. When you have another child, which so often is happening for a lot of families, there's this tendency to think like, okay, so now you're healed. Okay, bye-bye.
Right.
And you're not. And so, one of the things that I loved about this conference and that I love about, certain people in my life, and I have a support group and friends from that I love, is that I get to hear my kids' names uttered together, right? So I get to hear Collette and Elliot uttered together. And
Yeah.
so I have these people that are, still recognize that Collette is part of her family. And not everyone does, it's very easy. And even, I've had, people close to me who have sort of inadvertently, and I know that they don't mean it most of the time and all that, who have just sort of forgotten. So they'll say things like, well, with Elliot being an only child, I'm like, he's not, you know, but he looks like that to the rest of the
Right.
world. And so, I think that that's also something that I feel very lucky that I get to say her name, that other people are, know her story and know who she was and get to hear that. And that, in a family of activists and, nonprofit workers and all of that, that she's doing the good. I mean, right? She's carrying on our name. I kept my name, so she's carrying on the Vaulikenas and the Tisdahl notions of like, that's, my husband and I met doing our masters in nonprofit management, right? Like, what better way to say that like our child is doing all of this? I think it's really, really powerful and really amazing.
Well, I'm honored to be able to share Colette's story and to have you on. And I definitely want to give you both big hugs whenever I do see you guys. And
Sounds good.
where can our community follow along and support this amazing work you're doing?
Sure. So our website is Collette Louise, Collette, Louise.com. And I'm Michelle at ColetteLouise.com is my email. We're on Facebook. So Facebook, we're at Collette Tisdahl. Instagram, we're at Collette Louise Tisdahl. And Twitter, we're at the Tisdahl, which is my favorite one. I don't know why that I didn't do that for all the handles. And, like always happy to, to share, to learn, to hear, to share other people's stories. I think, it's all powerful. And I think that that's, to me, that's really how we're going to move and create change, is hearing those stories over and over again. I think that's really a powerful thing. And then, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say, really our capacity to help is based on the money we raise. And so, every dollar, we have worked this out so that we have donors who cover our overhead. And so every dollar that is donated is going straight to our financial assistance fund. So it's going straight to a family in crisis. And every penny, every dollar, every $5, every, $100, all of that really does add up and really does make it so that we can help more families. And so, yeah, if you can, whatever you can give, we're grateful for it. And it does go a long way.
Awesome. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you.